Hi, folks. Can you hear me okay? All right. Robin, are we ready to go? Cool. All right. I'm going to grab this. I think I'm a little taller than the last speaker. Cool. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Library and Museum here at Forbes Library. We are so very grateful that you've come out to be together in community, in person on a very cold night. But for those of you who could not make it in person, we are live streaming. So hello to the live stream viewers at home. This will also be available to view as a recording after the event. Give us a couple of days to touch it up. For those of you here in the room, if you need a restroom or a water fountain, you're going to exit the museum straight ahead into the Arts and Music Department and take a left. There are 2 restrooms and a water fountain. And your closest exits will be probably the ones you came in downstairs. So through the gallery, take a right, and you'll find your elevator and your stairwell. My name is Priya. I'm the head of adult services here at Forbes Library, and along with my colleague Robin, who is running our live stream, we are so very grateful to you all for coming out to learn and connect with each other on important topics. If you have ideas or feedback or questions or complaints or compliments on the programs we have here at Forbes Library, we are happy to hear them. You can either tell us in person, leave a note at one of the service desks, or there's a little QR code posted by the door there that you can scan with your phone and fill in a quick survey. We try to do programming that is relevant and interesting and educational and informative and fun for our communities here. So please do share your thoughts with us. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Jen for an introduction. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Jen Maripol, and it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's program. First, a thank you to Forbes Library for hosting us in this lovely space, with special thanks to Priya and Robin for their help coordinating tonight's program and providing tech support, as well as some hand-holding along the way. Paula Ressler is co-author with Becca Chase of Meaningful Encounters, Preparing Educators to Teach Holocaust Literature. She also wrote Dramatic Changes, talking about sexual orientation and gender identity through drama, winner of the 2003 Distinguished Book Award from the American Alliance for Theater and Education. Paula currently resides in Northampton. She is Emerita Faculty of English and Women's, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at Illinois State University, where she also directed the English education program. Her presentation this evening, From Vienna to Brooklyn, A Holocaust Story of Survival, is a multi-genre exploration of her research on her maternal uncle, who experienced devastating poverty and Nazi persecution of Jews during the wartime era in Vienna, Austria. Paula's friend Alex Kessler will join her to read the part of her uncle as Paula interviews him about his experiences. There will be time for questions after the presentation, and as you probably saw on your way in, light refreshments will also be available. So I'm going to ask everyone to please, if you haven't already done so, silent your phones and join me in welcoming Paula.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Just want to get my computer set up. Okay. And thank you, Robin and Jen, and welcome to everyone on live stream, too. I also offer my deep and heartfelt gratitude to the many relatives, friends, and mentors and neighbors who helped me bring this project to fruition. In this presentation tonight, I'm just setting up here. Okay. In this presentation, I primarily honor the memories of my uncle Arnold Alter and my son Sean D. Hopkins Ressler, as well as honoring the memory of my dear friend Irene Shigaki, who I just learned died from pneumonia at age 86 in Seattle. May all their memories be a blessing. Irene taught me about the cruel treatment of Japanese Americans during World War II. In her teacher education course at NYU that I attended, she shared that at age 5, she and her family were snatched from their lives on the West Coast and imprisoned in a concentration camp in Idaho. Telling her story in public inspired me to begin looking into and speaking about my own family's history during the Holocaust. Thank you again, Irene. This evening, I'll focus on what I learned from my dear maternal uncle, who experienced the rise of fascism in Austria and struggled with survival for his entire life. I've woven into the story how his love and care helped shape me into the person I am today. While I'd been studying the Holocaust as a teacher-educator for many years, I also pursued research about my own family heritage and how the loving and imperfect people who raised me helped me to better understand and cope with today's world. I'm hoping that sharing what I have learned will inspire you to explore questions you may have about your roots and encourage you to keep engaging in efforts to create a more just world. In the context of the extreme violence, man-made catastrophes, and political upheavals occurring today around the world, I often feel that focusing on my own ancestral meaning-making is an unwarranted privilege. More about this later. But despite my qualms and discomfort, I'm still compelled to continue along the personal genealogical path I began traveling approximately 2 years before I moved to Northampton, Massachusetts, from Normal, Illinois. Around that time, I played the role of Miss Stump, the fictional history librarian at the New York Public Library, who could find the answer to anything. She is the lead character in Miss Stump's Got It by playwright Chris Whitney, featured in the annual 10-Minute Play Festival produced by Heartland Theater in Normal, Illinois in 2019. What probably made me a shoo-in for the role was my distinctive, for that part of the country, Brooklyn accent. So wanting to continue theater work, which is a lifelong passion, I joined Young at Heartland Theater's Company for Elders, when they began meeting over Zoom and after COVID hit. Our initial assignment was to visit a garden and experience it with all our senses. What immediately popped into my head was the little garden my grandfather and uncle lovingly tended in the backyard of their home at 1747 East 14th Street near Kings Highway in Brooklyn. To help me talk about the garden with my colleagues, I first sketched what I remembered of it. Now, if you look closely, you might be able to see the apricot tree, a honeysuckle vine was there, a rose bush, there's a gooseberry bush, maybe a rose of Sharon. So it was my frustration with trying to draw this garden that led me to start taking art classes at the Hill Institute in Northampton as soon as I moved here. You can see why. The sensuousness of my maternal relative's garden nourished my relationship with these important people in my life and continues to cultivate my memories of them today. I remember especially the delicious, mouth-watering Marillenkanadels in Yiddish and German Kanoodles. These were potato dumplings stuffed with apricots from the garden, then rolled in breadcrumbs, butter, and sugar. Some of you may be more familiar with Schwetzenkanadels, made from small purple plums instead of apricots. So despite my limited artistic ability, drawing the garden elicited so many feelings and memories that I couldn't stop trying to capture them visually, using whatever materials I had. I next drew the roofline on a row of attached houses in which they lived. Here are photos from Google Maps of the buildings. And here's the front door. They lived less than a mile away from the apartment house in which I grew up, at 1665 East 7th Street near Avenue P. The only vegetation I remember near my house were the maple keys that fell on the ground that I used to stick on my nose. So then I drew what I remembered of the floor plan of their apartment, including the old furniture they had and where each item was located. My grandmother, Deborah, known as Dora, and whom I called Omama, usually sat in the living room, it's the LR on the drawing, in a comfortable cushioned chair. My grandfather, Mayer, whom I called Papa, sat in a big chair across from her, next to the radio, which was usually on when I visited, tuned to Yiddish songs, operas, classical music infused with East European folk melodies. Usually, there were copies of a Yiddish newspaper, probably Forwards, in English the Forward, on a table near him. My uncle, who lived with them, asked me whether I, his monolingual niece, who proudly announced that she learned how to read the New York Times in 4th grade, could read these newspapers, infusing his thought-provoking sense of humor into the conversation. So against one wall of the living room, there was a built-in cupboard, and that's where the rock candy was. Against another wall was a cabinet with dinner plates decorated with a picture of the Kaiser, maybe Kaiser Franz Joseph of Austria of the 1860s, who expanded legal rights to Jews. I like to think that Mama brought them with her from Europe, along with her feather beds. I had always assumed that my grandfather, who was a skilled carpenter and cabinet maker, had purchased the unit on 14th Street and probably did the finishing work on their one-bedroom apartment and a small rental unit on the 2nd floor. I know he did more work on the front porch, which somebody told me he did for my grandmother. When we came to visit, she often sat there in a rocking chair waiting for us to arrive. Next to the porch was the bedroom, in which Dora, Mayer, and Arnold shared, a common arrangement in crowded immigrant households. My grandmother's freestanding wardrobe was there, containing only navy blue and dark brown dresses. I remember feeling sorry for her that these were the only clothes she had. No one ever explained to me that she was following the strict rules of modesty of Orthodox women. So, here I am today, talking about what began as a brief exploratory theater exercise that triggered memories of a little garden, but which grew and grew to become this multi-year, multimedia project. I started remembering what I could about these special people in my maternal family, working-class Jewish immigrants from Eastern and Central Europe, some of whom escaped from excruciating poverty, European anti-Semitism and the Holocaust, and some of whom could not escape. So here's the only photo I have of my maternal grandparents, Dora and Mayer Alter, together, taken in 1950 on their 50th wedding anniversary. The next photo is the only one I have from Vienna. It was on the flyer. It is of my Uncle Arnold when he was about 16, my mother Hilda at about age 9, and my grandmother Dora when she was about 46, taken circa 1921 in Vienna. My mother, whose passport is shown here, came to the U.S. in 1929 when she was 18, 16 years after her father. My grandmother and uncle emigrated to the U.S. 6 years later in 1935, 22 years after my grandfather. Here is my grandmother's passport photo, and next is Arnold's. I don't have my grandfather's passport or any early photos of him. These ordinary people had a tiny footprint in the world and are barely remembered by anyone else today. As I learned to appreciate my Jewish heritage more as I grew older, as my wise and not so wise son Shandi predicted I would, they grew to matter more and more to me. Now I realize how integral a part of my life they were when I was young and how they helped shape me into the person I am today. When my mother's parents were alive, they and I were always strangers in a certain way, separated by language, culture, history, and trauma, yet somehow deeply and lovingly connected. Today I'm sad that I knew so little about them and nothing about the departed loved ones for whom they said Kaddish, the ancient Hebrew mourner's prayer, every week, and I am recently just starting to say Kaddish for them. But what finally brought me to center my research specifically on my uncle was something I rediscovered only 2 years ago. It was a rather deteriorated cassette tape recording of an interview I conducted with my uncle Arnold in 1982, 44 years ago. At the time of the interview, I was 38 years old and he was 77. In late January 2024, around when I turned 80, I painstakingly transcribed that tape word for word. I was so deeply moved after listening to my uncle's voice again, and wanting somehow to preserve the tape and other artifacts I had inherited, I sent an unsolicited letter to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum's Resource Center in Washington, D.C. I inquired whether they would want my uncle's audio-taped interview, my original rough transcript of it, along with an explanation of who my uncle was and why he mattered so much to me, as well as some documents from Europe that I had. I heard back from the museum almost immediately in early February 2024. After reviewing the sample I sent to them, James Gilmore, the oral history curator, replied, inviting me to donate my materials to the museum. The museum is now digitizing everything I sent, so it will be available to others in the future. Explaining the museum's interest in my uncle's materials, James Gilmore sent me an excerpt from his presentation to the Acquisitions Committee about my donation. He said, quote, "Arnold Alter's testimony is from the unique perspective of someone who was an adult during the wartime era. His interview and related documents provide a window into the experiences of Austrian Jews who were able to emigrate before the Anschluss. While his testimony does not go into great detail about his pre-war memories, he does describe Nazi violence against Jews from an eyewitness perspective. Also, the donor's supplement to the interview provides deeper insight into her uncle's difficult experiences post-emigration, experiences that contrast with many refugee narratives about life in the United States," unquote. When I finally looked closely at the documents I sent to the museum, I noticed that the surname on them was Planner. Previously, I had only known them by my grandfather's surname, Alter. Where did the surname Planner come from? This was the original question that led to my interest in doing some genealogical research, and I started a genealogy Havara, or study group, at Congregation B'nai Israel, CBI for short, the synagogue I attend in Northampton. I will never know, coming to the U.S. in 1913 at age 38, why it took my grandfather 22 years before he reunited with his wife and son. Did he leave Vienna to escape the draft and the World War that was imminent, as so many Jewish men did at the time, evading most certain death on the front lines? Was he fleeing an unhappy marriage? Did it take all that time for him to make enough money for Dora and Alter to come? Did he eventually pay for their trip, or his daughters 6 years earlier, or did someone else pay the fares? So many unanswerable questions now that they are all gone. So, who was Arnold Alter? While I also still have many unanswered questions about him, I know more about Arnold than about any of my other relatives who were born in Europe. Arnold helped to raise me. He never married and lived with my grandparents, his parents, until they died. When I was growing up, my uncle was like a surrogate father to Joni, who is my older sister, and me. My sister and I called him Unky, spelled U-N-K-E-Y, a childish term of endearment. It was an honorific chosen by my mother with her newly acquired English language skills and based on the German word for uncle, O-N-K-E-L. Never having his own children, she wanted her brother to have a close parental type of relationship with her children. I always felt more at home in my grandparents' house compared to my own, which was often an unhappy place because my father, Paula Ressler, left home when I was very young, although he gave my mother and I some basic support and stayed in my life peripherally until he died. Also a European immigrant, he entered the U.S. illegally in 1929 from Chernovitz, which at the time was part of Romania and is now Czernivtsi in Ukraine. To get around the immigration quotas, he lied about his age, saying he was 16 when he was actually 18, and traveled with his stepsister, who passed as his mother. I can't help but think how getting caught in such lies today in the U.S. can lead to imprisonment or death for immigrants, particularly for those who aren't white. Although I did not speak or understand the German and Yiddish that my mother's parents mostly spoke, I felt very close to them because they seemed to love my sister and me unconditionally. I was surprised when I learned during the interview with my uncle what a difficult relationship they had with their own son. More about that later. Throughout his adult life, my uncle had a very close and warm relationship with my mother and me. He often came to visit us with treats from local bakeries. When he could get there when driving cab, he would get pastries from Eclair Bakery, a popular Viennese pastry shop on West 72nd Street in Manhattan. Opened from 1939 to 1993, this famous cafe was frequented by German-speaking Jews, rich and poor alike, who went there for delicious reminders of the old country, and perhaps to encounter or hear about friends or relatives they hadn't heard from, and if they did or did not survive. Although religious, and we weren't, my uncle built much of his daily life around observing halakha, Jewish law and religious practice. He kept kosher, observed the Sabbath, prayed several times a day, and regularly attended services in their local shul. While searching Google Maps, I think I recognized the building in which their shul was located at 1629 East 15th Street, which is now the home of the Benos Yisrael School for Girls. When I saw and heard my uncle daven, swaying and chanting as he said his prayers, I could feel how at peace he seemed to be at those moments. I recently learned in a class on Jewish life, led by Rabbis Ariella Rosen and Jacob Fine at CBI, that the qualities I most admired and appreciated in my Uncle Arnold are those that are central to Jewish ethical life. His compassion for others, or rachamim, his sense of social justice, tzedek, expressions of loving kindness, chesed, and belief in the dignity of all humanity created in the image of God, B'Tselem Elohim. I thought of my uncle when I read in my synagogue's prayer book that we can see God in the love and generosity of the people around us. I may not define these feelings as God, but I have come to understand in recent years how much the elements of Judaism my uncle practiced were integral parts of his being, along with his keen understanding of the injustices and problems of the worlds he individually struggled so hard to navigate. These are the values and understandings he passed down to me. Through him, I learned about the tragic death of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. When the Rosenbergs were killed, their son Robert was 6 and their son Michael 9, my age. I remember being outraged at the injustice of young children losing their parents in this cruel way. I do remember Arnold telling me that he had identified as a socialist in Europe and that he had no desire to emigrate to Israel from Vienna. He called Israel, quote, just another death trap for the Jews, unquote. He said that most people he knew in Europe felt that way. This changed for him and for so many others after the 1967 war, when he said he became a Zionist, a term with multiple meanings. At the time, Arnold saw Jewish survival at stake again, this time in Israel, where Holocaust survivors were being threatened. I don't feel he suddenly changed from a socialist to a Jewish ethno-nationalist, someone who feels that Jewish survival requires a nation-state governed by Jews in which Palestinians live as second-class citizens or under military occupation. The only person outside the immediate family I ever saw my uncle interact with was Ziggy. Zygmunt Flecker, my grandmother's Dora's landsman, someone from the same area of origin. He came from Przemyślany, Poland, too, possibly a cousin. He emigrated to the U.S. from Vienna in 1930. Arnold said that Ziggy remained a socialist. I often visited as they played chess in the kitchen on East 14th Street, arguing for a good part of the time in German. Many years before I interviewed Arnold, when I asked him what they argued about, he told me, they argued about Israel. I have spent many years trying to figure out his and my own relationship to Israel. While horrified by the brutal Hamas attack against Israelis on October 7th, 2023, I don't believe he would have supported the genocidal revenge carried out by the Israeli government against the Palestinians in Gaza, nor believe that the political problems in the Middle East can be solved militarily. Anti-Semitism is real, from swastikas and name-calling in schools to recent massacres of Jews, including the December 14, 2025 Bondi Beach killings in Australia, where Jewish cousins of mine were celebrating in a park just nearby. But it is not anti-Semitic to protest the Israeli military's prolonged campaign of terror against Palestinian civilians, just as standing up against ICE in Minnesota and around the country is a way to stand up for human rights for everyone, everywhere. Giving this talk, my talk, so close to Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, with his linking of the war in Vietnam to the struggle against racism and for civil rights, is an urgent reminder of the risks but importance of standing up for universal human rights. I also recognize that a troubled colonial history can't just be undone. Israel is the product of overwhelming historical and political forces, and as a result became the homeland for the majority of Jews who survived the horrors of the Holocaust and their descendants. These survivors of historic and unending trauma need to live in peace and safety, as do the Palestinians. Palestinian poet Taha Muhammad Ali, whose biography I recently read in my Jews Read Palestinian Literature study group, succinctly and movingly states, quote, "Taking sides is not the point here. Suffering, longing, fear, these together make Palestine and Israel," and unquote, and one cannot be for just Israelis or Palestinians, unquote. I also join with Jewish American journalist Peter Beinart, who asked Jews to reckon with what Israel did in Gaza, coping with how I feel as a Jew whose tax dollars have been used to decimate Palestinian life in Gaza, also the West Bank and East Jerusalem. I'm committed to working within my own synagogue to support only just and peaceful solutions to the conflict. I'm also working with the Massachusetts Synagogue Network on Israel-Palestine, which fosters dialogue across American Jewish synagogues and community groups. I'm sure that Arnold would agree that the answer to anti-Semitism, as well as to anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian fear and hatred, is in building a world of peace, equality, and safety for all. So the continuing and yet loving arguments that Arnold and Ziggy had about Israel remain prescient for me and have motivated me to study and try to better understand this difficult history myself. Arnold also argued in German frequently with my mother, his sister, with whom he had a very close but sometimes emotionally volatile relationship. But their arguments were not about Israel. Their arguments featured daily survival issues, concerns about the parents, and what my mother, sister, uncle, and I needed. Arnold continued to live in the house on East 14th Street after his parents died, until my maternal cousin, Herta Seiden-Gutfreund, another Holocaust survivor from Vienna, shown here with my mother, moved him to Miami Beach in October 1984 to be near her, where he eventually died. She also took care of my mother in Florida for a while when my mother first contracted Parkinson's disease. My mother died back in New York, where Joni and I took care of her. She died in 1986. Here are two photos of Arnold in Miami. My Uncle Arnold and my mother remained close to Herta all their lives. After my uncle's death in 1989, I renewed my own relationship with Herta and eventually came out to her as a lesbian. She was very supportive, and later I learned that one of her granddaughters identified as lesbian and the other as non-binary, an example of how truth-telling with our elders can be very liberating. As Herta and I grew closer, and when she learned that I was interested in incorporating Holocaust studies more into my teaching, she asked me to see if I could find out what happened to her parents and sister, whom she had not heard from since she left them behind in Vienna in 1938 when she was 15. Based on guidance I received from my cousin Jane Reifer, an amateur genealogist, and research other relatives did, we received correspondence and documents from Gisela Wibheil, an archivist at the Documentation Center of Austrian Resistance in Vienna. The center was established to document resistance to and crimes of the Nazi era in Vienna. Her letter to us explained that Reinhard Heydrich, head of the Nazi secret police, ordered the expulsion of the rest of Vienna's Jews in 1942 to Mali Trostenets, a death camp in Minsk, now in Belarus, where they were to be killed immediately upon arrival. 16 trains with 15,000 people left Vienna for Minsk between May and October 1942, and there were few, if any, survivors. She sent us all copies of the Nazi documents recording Herter's relatives' deportations. This slide shows Pinkas Seiden's, Herter's father's deportation document. And the next slide is from Yad Vashem in Israel, listing the death of Herter's parents, Pinkas and Frida, and Sister Wanda Seiden, and the whereabouts of Herter and her other siblings. My father was able to sponsor Herter and her brother Arthur when they emigrated to the U.S. in 1938 because they were born in Western Europe. He may have tried but was unable to sponsor the rest of the family members because they were born in Poland. The 1924 Immigration Act established strict quotas for Eastern and Southern European immigrants as well as Japanese people. In my interview with him, Arnold mentioned that he knew something about what happened to Herta's family, even if not all the gruesome details. I speculate that asking her relatives to learn about her family may have been Herta's way of encouraging the younger generations to better appreciate who she was and their own heritage. Learning what happened to Herta's family inspired me to begin learning more about the Holocaust myself, its relevance to today, and how I could better prepare my students to teach Holocaust literature, something they were mandated to teach without having had any preparation. This led to co-writing a book along with Becca Chase, my spouse, called Meaningful Encounters, Preparing Educators to Teach Holocaust Literature. Our friend Irene Shigaki also inspired this work. We have a few discounted copies available for purchase after the presentation if you'd want one. Now, on to the interview with my Uncle Arnold. A poor Jewish refugee from 1930s fascist-dominated Vienna, Unky had very little formal education. He inferred that he began attending school when he was 6 years old in 1913, after his father left for the U.S. He also mentioned a course he took once a week for 2 years. The only document I have referring to Arnold's educational background is a large yellowed paper certificate that he saved from Das Gremium der Wiener Kaufmannschaft, the Committee of Viennese Merchants, noting his attendance in a school or training program in Vienna from 1920 to 1922, when he was 15 to 17 years old. Artifacts people choose to keep, no matter how seemingly significant or insignificant to others, are obviously important to them and can provide important guides for piecing together our own genealogical puzzles. The interview I did with Arnold took place in 1982 in my sister's living room in the suburb of Plainview, New York. This is a photo of Arnold taken in Plainview, possibly on the day I interviewed him. My son, Shandi, who was then 12, was sitting next to me. He sat very close, paying deep attention to what our uncle shared, and occasionally whispered something to me about what he was thinking, which unfortunately I can't remember. My sister listened in off and on. For a variety of reasons, it was difficult for her to discuss family history, let alone her own troubled childhood or difficult first marriage. She had remarried. So I was glad when Joni occasionally asked questions, sometimes leading to my uncle revealing important aspects of his life that we had all wondered about. In April 2025, Nina Citron, president of the Western Massachusetts Jewish Genealogical Society, and I co-taught a two-part adult education series on genealogy at CBI. During the April 15th session, my friend and CBI member, Mark Gervich, generously and movingly read the part of my Uncle Arnold. Today, my friend Alex Kessler will be reading that part. I am so grateful to both of them. Arnold sometimes called his parents Mutter and Vater, but during the interview, he referred to them most often as Omama and Opapa, his nieces' names for them, making sure that he would know to whom he was referring. I would know to whom he was referring.
Mutter, your Omama, was born in Poland around 1875. When she was 12, she was sent away because she didn't want to work cleaning house for her mother's sister. So there was a family in Poland, and they loved her very much, and they took her along to Vienna. And they had a factory in Vienna and taught her how to work with things. She was very good.
Did she start working in a factory at 12? Whatever work she did, Arnold seemed very proud of her survival skills.
Your Opapa, the same thing, born in 1875 in Romania.
Did you mean Romania was part of Poland then?
No, Romania is in Romania, not in Poland, in Dorohoi, a city in Romania. And he moved to Vienna.
Through Ancestry.com, I later confirmed both his parents' birthplaces, Shrymaslani, Poland for my grandmother, and Dorohoi, Romania for my grandfather.
She started making money, and then she moved in with a friend from those people who lived there.
Probably a rooming house.
And there she met Opapa. They were married in 1900, but before she got married, she had trouble. She gave Opapa money to visit his parents in Romania, and he didn't come back. She had to borrow money from her father to get Opapa back. Giving him money should have been stopped.
My sister Joni astutely observed, "You didn't like Opapa, did you?"
I didn't know what to like. I wasn't born yet. She said she wanted her money back, 300 crowns. It's like today, $3,000. She saved all of her money. She wanted to build him a place he can work, but he didn't work.
What did he do?
By 1900, Vater, your Opapa, had a very good job. Because he knew so much, they made him a foreman of 3,000 people. So he had an argument with the boss, you know. He took off his working clothes and really gave it to him. Vater said, "Get somebody else." So he quit. Omama begged him he should talk to the boss. It was a job. It was the only job around, and he lost it. He worked for the emperor. He worked on pianos and such things. But he didn't want to go back. He didn't want to work.
I think he said the emperor. The tape was hard to understand there. But this wasn't the only time that my uncle claimed that his father didn't want to work. Corroborating these negative impressions about his father was a letter he mentioned receiving in Vienna from someone in America, saying that his father was eating steak while they were starving and that they should ask him for money. Whether true or not, on another occasion, he claimed his father was a womanizer and a gambler. I don't know what evidence he had for drawing that conclusion. I didn't take what he was saying about his father very seriously at the time. I loved my Opapa. I remember him smoking cigars and happily singing along with the music on the radio. I was told that he had played the fiddle, but I never heard him do that. What is clear, though, is that Arnold's father and mother had a troubled relationship almost from the beginning.
Then he lost a daughter. Vater cried when a baby they had died.
I hadn't heard about this before. Maybe this birth and death are registered in Vienna.
Then he said he wanted to go to the United States. He left Vienna in 1913 for America. He forgot he had a family, Opapa. He just left. I was going on 6 then, and a year later, the war broke out.
So, what was it like for you and Mommy and Omama in Vienna after Opapa left?
I had nothing to eat. Nobody had anything. So Mutter went to work in factories. I had to watch my sister. I see Mutter sometimes. She worked 36 hours, sometimes 48 hours a week. When she came back from work, the money was no good. A piece of bread was 8 cents, and at the end of the week, it was 24 cents. That's hard bread, a yellow one, only a quarter piece. My sister, I mean your mother, got everything for free milk and everything.
She was just a baby.
I couldn't touch it. She came home. If I touched something, she knew right away.
In a previous conversation, Arnold had told me that he used to go out to beg for milk for the baby, and he couldn't have any of it because, even though he was starving too. In the taped interview, he spoke of going to a place where he could get food handouts, probably some charitable organization.
So I went to, it was like here, a club or something, to get food. I took a piece of paper to wrap it in because it smelled so bad to me. They wanted to feed us meat they give to pigs. I was hungry, and my sister eats everything, so I wanted to eat, but there was nothing for me. I had Domama's body. I was always full, hungry, but full. I had to learn to say no when people asked me if I was hungry. Your Omama told me, when they asked me if I ate, to say yes. I learned to eat nothing.
Why didn't his mother want people to know that he was hungry? Was she ashamed of being poor? Perhaps she was afraid of losing custody of her children?
And when I was a little older, then they had a place where I could go to eat. What did I do? I put it in the pockets. I came home. One day, I brought home a Frankfurter and half a roll, and I was hiding it. The people who lived with us had a maid, and she found it. She stole food. I couldn't complain. I didn't eat. I had to sleep with a big woman in the bed. She hit me when she turned around. You know, I couldn't do anything. I was powerless.
To survive, Dora must have rented out space in their apartment to strangers.
So when the war came almost to an end, I had to stay in line from 11 or 12 o'clock at night to 8 in the morning to get almost 2 pounds of potatoes with coupons. Every night. Then Omama changed her job. She worked from 9 or 10 in the evening to set up chickens in the market. Then she'd come home. But she brought home things that was for us. She had to sell things to black market, so whatever was left was for us.
I next asked about the broader political situation based upon some of the questions I had prepared before the interview. So what was it like in Vienna before Hitler took over? The Anschluss, when Hitler annexed Austria, occurred in 1938, and you left in 1935 before Hitler arrived. When did it start changing? Do you remember? How old were you when it started changing?
I was upper 20s, about 25. I couldn't get a pass to go to the United States. Mutter never did anything on time. I was going for a pass at the Polish consulate. Somebody stopped it. Were you born here? Yes. Your mother is an Austrian citizen? No, a Polish citizen. If you're a Polish citizen, they send you in the army. Mutter never became an Austrian citizen. So I had to wait 6 years on account of that to come here. Whatever she started, she never finished.
So how easy was it for Jews to leave the country then?
You could go, but you had to take a pass out that you were not coming back. So people didn't want to go. They tried to get away to sell a business. It wasn't that bad in Austria then. Herta's parents didn't go. They should have gone. They had a business. Herta's parents got caught in 1942.
Was it bad for Jews in Vienna before Hitler came?
Oh, yes. They had Nazi clubs, and they raided the shoals, especially on holidays. They ripped off ears just like this, and every third corner was a truck with Nazis in case there's trouble. That happened every few months. It was bad. The Nazis came in, and all on top of the government was shot, and then they took over. But a few years before, the Nazis took over for just 3 days. Then the socialists took over, and they shot them. Mussolini was on the border of Austria. He hated Hitler. If the Nazis take over, Mussolini would march in. So the Nazis didn't take over then. But they killed 3,000 men. It was all in the big offices and buildings, up on the top of the roof. They shot them down. There was 100,000 people demonstrating against them. There was a Nazi trial, and then there was 2 years later the socialists took over, and they shot them.
The Nazis shot the socialists?
No, the Austrians shot them. There are two parties, socialists and Christian Democratic. So when they had the power, the others helped them. So nobody could go in and out. I was out there making a delivery, so a policeman picked me up, and they took me to make my delivery to someone, but I didn't know what goes on. I was only 14 years old.
That would have been around 1919.
And so it developed that Hitler had a party already long before he wanted to invade, because everything changed. He killed the labor union members, the parliament. They all went to France to save their lives. The big ones went over to the Nazis from the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, to keep their jobs. When Austrians found out, it was too late.
So before Hitler, was there a lot of anti-Semitism in Vienna?
There was always Catholics. Other churches were not allowed. And the Polish people hated us. And when Franz Joseph died, the Emperor of Austria, the war was on. And so it was when Germany lost World War I. There were 5 or 6 million Austrians, 2 million in Vienna. Nothing to live on, no industry, no work, no nothing. I seen 3 revolutions and the war. In 1933, when Hitler came to power, he said he's going to take back all those that Austria lost: Yugoslavia, Hungary, Poland, Czechoslovakia. I'm going to take it because it's all a German nation. Everybody knew the government had no power to do anything. They were afraid Hitler was coming any day to Austria. And when it happened, he had a full Nazi party, thousands of members. And he came in power in 1933. And then he gave us the Night of the Knives. They used it to kill the socialists, the Jews. If you're not for us, you're against us.
He was referring to the Night of the Long Knives from June 30th to July 2nd, 1934. This was when Hitler consolidated his power in Germany and Austria, starting with the purge of the stormtroopers led by Ernst Röhm, a friend of Hitler's who was known to be homosexual. They were a violent paramilitary organization everyone hated, but they helped Hitler come to power. When the group became a liability to him, Hitler got rid of the stormtroopers and its leader, creating another scapegoat, gay men. The legal persecution of gay men was only eliminated in East Germany in 1968 and West Germany in 1969. But convictions against gay men, some of whom were still in prison, were not fully overturned until 2017, when same-sex marriage became legal there. This conversation about history and politics made my sister very uncomfortable. She changed the subject abruptly, asking, "What did you do for fun? Did you have any friends?" I knew Joni wondered about my uncle's apparent lack of a visible social life because she'd commented about this to me in previous conversations. These conversations always included what I think of today as the family's urban legend that Arnold never married because he was in love with one of Herta's sisters who was eventually killed by the Nazis. Having his train of thought suddenly interrupted with these questions, my uncle became momentarily disoriented. But after he gained his composure, he responded to Joni's questions.
I didn't have a trade, only working. I couldn't take a trade because they closed all trades for 3 years. So I had a friend at that time. He was a big manufacturer of men's clothing. He had business contacts in the United States, too. And in Vienna, they had passes to theaters. So I went with him. Understand it cost nothing. Then I worked for some other people. I was young. I was about 15 and a half years. My friend, the manufacturer, died. The wife took me in because her husband died. So I had to help the other business partner. He was big in theater, and he asked me if I wanted to go to the theater. I said, yes. He gave me a card and a number to call when I go there. And this man, he called me up. He says, "Arnold, tell them we're friends." So I said, "We're friends. I helped you, you helped me." He said, "Okay." For 3 years, we didn't pay a thing. All operas, all those good shows, you know. And then he died. So, both places, my friends died.
He called these businessmen friends, a term my uncle used loosely, which did not clarify his relationships with those men. But I couldn't help but read sexual innuendos into the language he used to describe his relationships with the older men who employed him. I don't know what their motives were, but clearly for my uncle, they provided a break from his otherwise harsh existence. For an impoverished child who had been abandoned by his own father, the privileges and gifts he received from these men may have been mixed blessings.
Finally, I found a job, and I make a few dollars. He was a Yugoslav, and he didn't speak German yet. Yugoslavia became a state in 1918. His mail came in, and I did some correspondence. From there on, it got heavier for me because Mama couldn't help. I was young. I had to leave there. I went from place to place. Then there was bad times. We couldn't get food. Then came the Hitler time, and we were the only Jews in our building. A neighbor came up to Mama and told her, "I will take your apartment away." "Understand, in front of our house," he said this. I put my bag down on the floor and took the papers out to show we belong there. They had no feelings. The kids were trained before Hitler came, like mules. They practiced to put a bayonet in. They couldn't take it out. They couldn't do it. It took them a few months to learn. And then the kids said to Mama, "You know we like you. You know it. But they trained us to put in a Jew a bayonet in and take it out without feeling. We can do it now with a knife." He was only 11 years old.
This was a neighbor.
Yeah. For the rich people, they had to join the Nazi Party because they didn't trust the poor people to have the machines and tanks and this, you know. But the rich ones had to give it and study to be officers. The business people, the little business people, the big business people, all had to give, and that's the way it was. So, the rest of Europe was afraid of him because Hitler got so many weapons from England, from France, from the United States. Even Jews gave him money against the communists. They were afraid of Russia. So there was actually no government, a government without power.
While I was considering how to respond, Arnold very abruptly shifted course.
Everywhere you want to go, you have to go through Austria, in the center.
Austria was in the center, you mean, of Europe?
All the trains, everything is in Austria, even now. You have to be rich. They were the best professors, the best schools, the best colleges, the best universities in Austria. The best. And they had to run. Teachers had to run. Where can they go? They let them in here in America because they're intelligent people. Workers, they didn't need. You understand?
They only let the rich in? It's not very different today.
They say there is no quota. There is a quota. And those people who came from the other side, from the East in Europe, are highly intelligent people. They're very poor, but workers, tailors, all those people, they all went into business. They didn't care how little they make. They didn't want to work for anybody else. But when they came over here, they took them to factories from the ships, you know, and put them to work. And they had to go up a building. They had to take their tools with them. They had to eat and sleep there because if somebody wasn't there, they took their tools. Nobody would know. Opapa had the same life. Like the others who came off the boats, he had to sleep on his tools. 6 flights up.
He showed some empathy for his father here.
He had to go up and down. Every one of the people he lived with worked for $3 a week. They didn't have enough money for food. They went up to the 3rd floor, the 4th floor, and they slept on that straw. Women and men slept together by each other to lay down. In Coney Island, he had the same thing. He had no money. East New York and the Lower East Side, all the places he lived, all of the people who came. And Opapa came 23 days on a ship, all the way down in the ship. They pushed them together. They ate garlic.
To prevent sickness?
No, it was cheap. Understand? But they all smelled. They had no place to wash. They had to lay in the same places. I came with only 9 days on a freighter. There was a big strike in Le Havre, so my ship didn't sail. So I had to take that freighter. And your mama gave me some salami and a few pennies. She wanted to show how poor she was. I was almost 30 years old. I had under 100 pounds. I had to show how strong I was. Otherwise, they wouldn't let me go by the freighter.
This is how he described what happened when he first landed in the U.S. and his father came to meet him at the boat.
Vater has come and picked me up. I say, "That's my father." But your opapa says, "That's not my son. I expected a man. That's a boy." They had to send somebody else to pick me up. I came over here and had nothing to put on. I had short pants, and then those big socks over it, and a jacket that didn't close. So, the time when I came here, I went to my sister, your mother, for a few days. And my sister looked at me. 6 years ago, she saw me last. She almost didn't recognize me. After 2 weeks, I was very sick from the changes in climate and vomiting and certain waters to drink. And Vater comes home and says, "From now on, you go to work. I worked enough." I didn't even know what he meant by it. I wasn't clear, so I went to work as a furrier. I had to stretch animal skins. After working there 3 weeks with those skins, I had no skin on my hands. So they didn't let me work. The last 2 weeks, they didn't pay me. My Viennese friends, they were in business, and they pressed out of you what they could.
It makes me sad to realize the role that social class prejudice continued to play in the light of refugees, even from the same country, all of whom faced anti-Semitism. While they shared a common language and religion, these so-called friends primarily represented people who knew someone who knew someone who was looking for workers, who knew someone who knew someone who was looking for work.
I had to go to their house on a Saturday and Sunday and work there for them. They didn't pay me, but I wanted to have a few dollars for when when Omama comes in November. So I went to the Hotel Taft. I worked there from May or June until October, and I saved $90. I didn't eat.
He explained that because he didn't speak English or any of the other languages people in the hotel spoke, he had to work alone and was put on back-breaking work there, pushing the laundry cart around.
Then I went as a taxi driver for 9 years. I had holdups. The company I was in, they wouldn't pay me. I had to get up at 3:30 in the morning, take out the cars by 5:30. Then I went for 10 years or more, I don't know, a runner on Wall Street. I had to retire at 62 because I was sick already from old Papa, carrying him around. He couldn't move nothing. Old Papa was sick from lung cancer for 2 years. After he died, Omama was sick for 7 years. Omama had intestinal cancer. The last 3 months, unbelievable. I had to wash her. I didn't know what I could do.
They couldn't put her in the hospital?
At that time, there was no health insurance, no Social Security. There was no hospitalization.
Nothing?
Nothing. I am the son. The son had to pay. I spent $8,000 on Opapa, then $14,000. I had nice savings. I had to stay home. I had to pay off the house and everything. If I had the money, I was worth at that time, I didn't buy shoes. I didn't buy ties. I just worked.
You didn't take care of yourself at all.
I couldn't. When I came over here, Omama gave me for 5 years every day cream cheese and jelly for the day.
This is when my sister abruptly announced that we had to come to the dinner table. What a sad note to end on. Thank you, Alex, for your heartfelt presentation of Uncle Arnold. almost 30 years old when he arrived. Emaciated from the impoverished life he led in Europe and with no English language skills, Arnold had a terrible time adjusting to life in the U.S., both physically and emotionally. Although he grew stronger and healthier, life remained challenging for him, in part due to his toxic relationship with his father, which never improved. I speculate that this was due to his son never meeting his father's masculinist norms and expectations. I remember overhearing a heated conversation between them when I was young about the power tools Papa kept in the basement. He refused to teach his son his trade, saying, "It was too dangerous." I didn't understand why the power tools were too dangerous for his son, but not for him. My own father did not regard Arnold favorably either. I remember him once telling me that my uncle wasn't really the nice person I thought he was. I don't remember the context, but I'm sure that class differences and my uncle's lack of conformity to male gender roles were factors. My uncle also told me that my father exploited him when he worked for him in a factory in Coney Island. My father's relationship with my mother and her family appeared troubled from the beginning. His mother, Shandel, or Jenny, who went by the name Jenny in the U.S., apparently didn't approve of his marriage to my mother and never treated my mother, my sister, or me affectionately. When she emigrated here from Chernovitz, she lived mostly with my father's sister and her husband, who was a doctor, and helped to raise their children, my cousins. Unlike us, my cousins had a very positive feeling about her. And as far as I know, I'm the only one in my family who considers that my uncle's presentation of masculinity may have been related to what we would recognize today as non-normative sexual orientation or gender identity differences. As an Orthodox Jew, being gay, or what today we might consider non-binary or trans, was not only unacceptable at that time, but also basically unthinkable. I came to believe that he might have been gay or would have identified as gay or queer today long after I conducted the interview. I began putting together the gentle man I knew with the fact that he did not have visible friendships or intimate relationships with anyone except his immediate family and his chess buddy Ziggy. Adding to this with his father's and my father's negative responses to him, as well as the exploitative relationships he described with men he worked for in the U.S. and Europe. The conversations we had in earlier and later years also contributed, such as his complaints to me about his upstairs neighbor, a widow who, to his annoyance, kept seeking his attention. And in the last conversation we had over the phone shortly before he died, my dear Uncle Arnold complained that the women at the Hebrew home for the aged in Miami would not leave him alone. I can see why, too. As a lesbian who was in the closet to my family until after his death, I felt honored that he shared his deep personal feelings and experiences with me, both during the interview and after, including about the women who sought his attention. Perhaps he sensed that we shared a common identity and social stigma, although neither of us acknowledged anything like this to one another. He probably would not have raised these issues with my sister, whom he loved, but who lived a gender-normative life in the suburbs. With my mother, maybe. The possibility that a member of my family of origin may have identified as gay today, and who showed me such unconditional love in the gender-normative world in which I was raised, helped to prepare me to live my life more authentically than I otherwise would have been able to do. Arnold would not have appreciated me outing him then, whether or not he was gay. Were he still alive today and queer-identified, he might not have remained in the closet, or he might have identified himself as asexual, or as someone who does not want to be defined by either sexuality or gender. Of the 4 people present during the interview with Arnold, I'm the only one still alive. Of course, I miss them all so much. And I am so sad that I didn't ask my uncle many follow-up questions either during or after the interview. I spoke with him so infrequently before he died. My cousin Herta, trying to prolong his life, insisted that I not tell him that his sister died in November 1986, not long after he moved to Florida in 1984. Sadly, this discouraged me from contacting him because he would always ask me about my mother. I also regret that my son, my sister, and I never shared our feelings with one another about the interview and all that Arnold shared with us that day. So my story is full of unanswered questions and mysteries, some of which I hope to pursue in the future. It's a narrative about imperfect people living in a world that was and remains very hard to negotiate. I'm reminded of Louis Rosenthal's Devar Torah, or Torah Talk, at CBI recently, who spoke so movingly about the biblical matriarchs and patriarchs, all of whom are portrayed with deep human imperfections. I hope that this story, based on my memories and the research I've done so far, will encourage others to reach back in time through memory and genealogical research, to better understand the complexities that shape us all and the need to have compassion for ourselves and others. This genealogical project has been life-changing for me, although I still know so little about these people who mattered so much to me. As a Jew whose family escaped or was victimized during the Holocaust, I remember feeling very alone as a child because I knew so little about the people who raised me and had little knowledge of extended family. I didn't ask and no one told. That's not uncommon. But a consequence of this, what is not usually discussed, is that growing up and well into my adulthood, I felt isolated, and I did not have anyone to call upon when I needed help in times of crisis. It's not surprising also that in 1968, when I joined the protests at Columbia against the war in Vietnam, having dropped out of college again, and someone asked me who I was and where I came from, I responded, "I'm no one, I came from nowhere." My sense of isolation was particularly devastating at the time that my son Shandi began struggling with heroin addiction and died through suicide in 2001. Several relatives in the second and first generation after the Holocaust in my family became heroin users, and I know of 3 who died as young adults through suicide. I believe that what my son and others in my family experienced exemplify what historian Marion Hirsch theorized as post-memory traumas, passed from generation to generation, with the younger generations experiencing the original traumas almost as their own. It was only after my son died that I turned to Judaism with its emphasis on life to help me grieve his loss. Thankfully, my Jewish heritage was there to breathe life into me when I needed it the most. Now, neither my uncle nor my son had their own children to whom they could pass on the wisdom of their life experiences and ethical values. But along with me, Shandi deeply loved his great-uncle Arnold. It was Arnold who taught Shandi how to play chess, which became a passion for my son, a skill he was proud of and was able to teach others, including his younger half-brother Rafi, whom I now call my son from another mother and who calls me his mother from another brother. Rafi now channels both Unki's and Shandi's love for chess to his own children, along with both their strong desires to live in a more just world, carrying on the tradition of L'dor v'dor from generation to generation, a concept central to the survival of Jewish life and wisdom. In large part, it is Rafi's support that has encouraged me to learn more about my own heritage, become more able to honor the memories of these special people, and to find ways to pass on their wisdom to others. Rafi isn't Jewish. However, with a half-brother who was, and a grandmother who was Armenian, he understands the importance of what we can learn from the experiences of our ancestors and their intergenerational wisdom. Perhaps this is the year that he and I will make Marilyn Canadles together. Here is a photo of Rafi at the Shandi Hopkins Memorial Chess Tournament in Lubeck, Maine on March 12, 2025, organized by Dan DeLuca of the Maine Chess Association. Rafi holds a drawing by Dan inspired by the photo Rafi showed him of Shandi playing chess in Harvard Square. At the tournament, Rafi said about his dear and painfully troubled brother, quote, "Shandi was a kind, compassionate, curious, and intelligent soul. He was an ardent chess player and a friend of Josh Waitzkin, the subject of the book and film Searching for Bobby Fischer. Wherever chess is played, his memory will live," unquote. And here is the original photo of Shandi playing chess in Harvard Square circa 1988, taken by the talented photographer Elsa Dorfman, whose son was Shondi's classmate at Cambridge Ringen Latin High School. I donated the interview tape, early transcript, introductory essay, and accompanying archival material to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum as a way to inscribe my uncle in the Book of Memory, so that after I pass, others may know him a little. He was a giving and loving person, someone who cared deeply about the world, decried injustice, and found comfort in his religion. At the same time, he was vulnerable due to poverty, his traumas from living in Vienna during the rise of murderous fascism, and the fact that he did not meet certain traditional norms valued by the people he cared most about. He struggled to survive from the time he was a young child until his death. May his memory and those of all family members mentioned in this narrative who have passed be blessings. This project helps me honor the memories of the loving and unacknowledged people who raised me, passing down the love our ancestors had for us and the love we had for them through learning more about them, telling their stories, and having the chance to share it with others helps make life sweeter and more complete. To quote from the song, quote, "The story popularized by Brandi Carlile," which some of you may know, quote, "All of these lines across my face tell you the story of who I am. So many stories of where I've been and how I got to where I am, but these stories don't mean anything when you've got no one to tell them to. Thank you for listening to Arnold Alter's story, my uncle's story, and my own." Thank you.
Yeah, so I think we have time for a few questions. What we're going to do is bring the mic to you in the audience so everyone can hear and folks on the live stream can hear as well. All right. Questions?
I'll bring the mic to you.
You mentioned that his last name changed, but did you tell us why? I don't remember that.
Yes, in the documents I had from my family in Europe, their last name was Planer, Planer. I had never heard of that name before. And I have not done the research to find out where it came from. I only knew them by the name Alter, but their documents all said Planer. That was their names in Europe. So I don't really understand any of that. I don't know if I ever will, but I'd like to find out.
Do you think it might have anything to do with a maiden name?
I have no way of knowing. If I don't, I could do the research. I haven't done the research yet, and my friend Nina has encouraged me to do the research, but I haven't done it yet.
Thank you. When you say doing research, where are you doing research? What sources were you using for this?
I originally only used the sources I had. I didn't do, although Nina and some people at the library helped me find some documents where I went to when the boats that people came over on. Nina's the expert with some of this, but I haven't done a lot of it. There's much more I can do, just cousins who've told me things or who had documents of their own, but I really haven't followed up with anything other than what I already had, which I'm hoping to do, but it's a big project. It's huge. And some of the research needs to be done in Europe or in with European sources. I won't find out other information if I don't go to those sources.
Paula, that was great. It was so touching. You would be surprised how much information exists. It's sort of like a treasure hunt or looking for a needle in a haystack. There are things you could discover. You could be lucky and find them quickly. You could be unstoppable and eventually find them. So if you're interested in genealogy, talk to me.
Yeah, Western Massachusetts Jewish Genealogical Society. Nina's the president of that group and has worked with them for ages and knows lots and lots about genealogy research. So she's wonderful to work with. I have a question for you. There's a lot of history and information that I tried to include in that talk. Was any of it understandable? It was a lot I wanted to incorporate as much as I could of that, but I wasn't sure it would work in a presentation.
Paula, that was really fabulous. My question has to do with Yisker books. And I was wondering if there's a Yisker book for the community that your family was, from in Vienna and in the villages surrounding Vienna.
And I know that the Yiddish Book Center has a lot of Yisker books too, so I haven't gone to them, but that's certainly a possible source. I'm thinking that I do have to write to the government in Vienna to see if there's any registration of people by the name of Planner. And even if my grandmother had a marriage certificate, I don't know if they officially got married, if she officially married an Alter or not.
Sorry, I have a follow-up.
Oh, yeah.
Here in the neighborhood, the Yiddish Book Center has a lot of Yisker books.
Yes.
It may be that something would be there, even.
It's very likely. Yeah, yeah.
They're also online at jewishgen.org. Many of them are being translated into English. So that's a treasure trove right there.
This may be what I have to do from now on, to do some of that research I've talked about. Thank you, Andy.
Getting my workout.
Hi. Thank you for your presentation. And I've been looking for my family, and my last name is Alter.
Oh my gosh, we have to talk. Wow. Well, there are no other questions. I want to thank some people who have helped me put this together, including Jen Mirapol for helping me work this through and get this presentation going, the folks here, Robin and Priya at the library, Andy, who put together this beautiful playlist that I gave him of music that I thought my uncle would love and I loved and grew up with, and aside from Brandy Carlisle's song, which he didn't know. My editor, my God, we share the same bed. I don't recommend that for everybody, but boy, it's great. She's very convenient having an editor to sleep with. Sorry. And Alex, oh my gosh, Alex, thank you so much for being my Uncle Arnold today and working with me on this. It's just an honor to work with you, and what a pleasure.
He actually looks like your uncle.
Well, the bald head, for sure. They're both very dear people, and I'm so lucky to have these wonderful people in my life. And I think it was Robin who said to me, oh my gosh, what an amazing crew you have. These wonderful people who have helped me put all this together, and Scott, and all great, and my neighbors from Village Hill and who are here tonight, and from the gym, and from everywhere, so. And our writing group, well, Sally's from many parts of my life. So please help yourself to refreshments, and happy to chat with people if, we have a few minutes. I don't know what, oh yeah, we're, no, 7:30, we're good on time, all right. So thank you, Rob and Priya, everybody, thank you all for coming.